These are questions 11 through 15 for the review for test 1. So the first question is an absolute value inequality. And just like an absolute value equation, we first want to isolate the absolute value part of it. So I'm going to subtract the 9 first, and I'll get 8 absolute value y plus 7 is less than negative 16. Then I'm going to divide by 8. So I get absolute value of y plus 7 is less than negative 2. Now here's the thing. Had this number been positive, we would have set up our two absolute value inequalities and solved them. But you got to think about this for a second. When you get a negative over here, I want you to just drop your writing utensil and I want you to think about what this means. The absolute value refers to the distance you are from 0. And we never measure distance in negative numbers, okay? So therefore, you can never take an absolute value of something and end up with an answer that's smaller than negative 2, because it would, of course, be negative, right? Think of it this way. When we take the absolute value of something, we always get something positive, or 0 at the worst. And so that answer will never be less than negative 2. So in this case, you don't even need to do anything. You just say, there's no solution to this. We will never have an absolute value that is less than negative 2. All right, so let's look at number 12. There's kind of a glare on that. Maybe if I think that's probably a little bit nicer. Okay, so here we have a rational equation. Rational because there's a fraction going on, okay? So how would I solve for this? Well, I would choose to cross multiply. So I'm gonna, basically, it's the equivalent of multiplying both sides times u plus 4. And I do that so that it cancels over there. On this left side, I end up with negative 7 times u plus 4 equals negative 2. Now I have an equation without the fractions, so this becomes very simple at this point. So if I distribute my negative 7, I get negative 7u minus 28 equals negative 2. If I add 28 to both sides, I get negative 7u equals positive 26. In my last step, I would divide by negative 7. And I would just leave it in fraction form, because unless they ask for a rounded decimal, then you don't want to do a decimal, then you want to leave it as a fraction. Now, if this could simplify, I would certainly do that. If I didn't know for sure whether it simplified, one quick way of checking is to type in 26 over negative 7 as a fraction in my calculator and see if it reduces for me. But of course 7 is prime and 7 does not go into 26, so therefore that is reduced. Okay, so let's look at question 13. This is also a rational equation. It's a little bit harder than number 12 because we've got to figure out the common denominator. So if I factor this out, I get 2 times y plus 5. So my common denominator, what everything fits into, is 2 times y plus 5. So I'm going to multiply every term times the common denominator, which is 2 times y plus 5. I do this so that I can cancel all my denominators and then I'm left with things that are no longer fractions. So here what cancels is everything, right? The 2 and the y plus 5. So I'm just left with negative 7. Here nothing cancels because there wasn't a denominator. So 1 times 2 times y plus 5 is 2 times y plus 5. And then equals, here the y plus 5's cancel, leaving 6 times 2, which is 12. And now it's an easier equation to solve. So I'm going to distribute my 2, negative 7 plus 2y plus 10 equals 12. -7 and 10 is 3 equals 12, minus the 3, I get 2y equals 9, divide by 2, y equals 9/2. Again, 9/2 doesn't simplify. They did not ask me to put it as a decimal, so I'm going to leave it as a fraction. Okay, let's move on to number 14. So 14 gives me the square root of a negative number, which we know we won't have any real answers, but they want us to use imaginary numbers to figure out what this would be. So -1 is the same as I squared, and that's an important fact to memorize, because that's how everything spins out on the whole imaginary number system. So that means I can replace this negative with an I squared. So that's I squared times 49, right? Because -1 is the equivalent of I squared. So the square root of I squared is I, the square root of 49 is 7, and they want us to write it in that direction, 7i. So that's my answer for that. All right, last problem on this video. I have the product of two binomials, and notice I have imaginary numbers in there. So how do I multiply two binomials? I use the FOIL method. First, outer, inner, and last. So f, the first, would be 5 times 2, which is 10. Outer is 5 times 5i, which is 25i. Inner is -3i times 2, which is minus 6i. And then last is -3i times 5i, which is -15i squared. All right, so 25i minus 6i is 19i. And remember, I squared is -1. So -1 times -15 would be +15. Then I can combine the 10 and the 15 to get 25 plus 19i. Remember that they want your answer in this format, a plus bi, which means the real part needs to be first, and then the imaginary part needs to be second. So if I type it in as 19i plus 25, it will mark it wrong because that's not the format that they're wanting. All right, that's it for these.